The imperial palace floated in the darkness of space, like a crystal crown. It was so large that entire cities could fit inside its walls. Lights sparkled from 1,000 windows, and ships came and went like tiny insects around a lamp. Inside this magnificent place lived the ruler of the Draconis Empire, a dragon so old and powerful that entire star systems bowed to his name. Dragon King Taeyong sat on his throne as he had done for 3,000 years. The throne was carved from a meteorite older than most planets. His golden scales reflected the light from the viewing screens that surrounded him. His eyes, ancient and wise, watched everything without showing any feeling at all. Today, like every day, ambassadors lined up before him. They came from hundreds of different worlds, each carrying treasures to offer the great king. A merchant from the crystal planets presented a gem that could power a city for a century. A warrior from the fire worlds offered a sword forged in the heart of a dying star. A scholar brought ancient writings that revealed secrets of the universe. One by one, Taeyong waved them all away with his massive claw. His voice was quiet but firm. "I accept no gifts." The ambassadors bowed and left, disappointed but not surprised. Everyone in the empire knew this about the Dragon King. He had never accepted a single gift in his entire reign. Scholars studied this mystery in their universities. Some said he was too proud to accept anything from others. Some believed he was teaching a lesson about the emptiness of material things. The truth, locked deep in Taeyang's heart, was something he never spoke about. Far below the throne room, in the lower levels of the palace, a different world existed. Here, humans worked quietly, cleaning and maintaining the vast structure that housed 10,000 dragons. The humans had only been part of the empire for 50 years. Their home planet had been dying when the dragons saved them, giving them new technology and new life. In return, humans worked in positions that dragons considered beneath them. Daehoon pushed his cleaning cart through the long hallway, his son Jaiwon walking beside him. The boy was 12 years old, small for his age, with quick hands and curious eyes that noticed everything. "Always check the corners," Daehoon said, showing his son how to properly clean the viewing platforms. Dragons have excellent eyesight. They will notice even the smallest speck of dust. Jaiwon nodded, watching carefully. He had been learning his father's work for 2 years now. It was hard work, but honest work. His father took pride in it, and so did Jaiwon. "Father," Jaiwon asked quietly, "is it true that the Dragon King has never accepted a gift from anyone?" Daehoon paused in his work. "That's what they say. 3,000 years, and not one gift accepted." "Why not?" "I don't know, son. Perhaps when you've lived as long as he has. Nothing seems special anymore." Jaiwon thought about this as he polished the crystal surface. He couldn't imagine living for 3,000 years. He couldn't imagine not being excited about a gift. A strange sound echoed from somewhere nearby. It sounded like someone crying. Jaiwon looked up, trying to locate the source. His father was busy with the cleaning equipment and didn't seem to notice. "I'll be right back," Jaiwon said, following the sound. He found her hiding behind a tall pillar in a forgotten corner of the hall. She was a young dragon, no bigger than a large horse, with scales that shimmered and changed colors like oil on water. Right now, those scales flickered between deep blue and gray. She had her face pressed against the pillar, and her whole body shook with quiet sobs. Jaiwon knew he should leave. Humans weren't supposed to approach dragons without permission, especially not royal dragons. And this had to be a royal dragon, based on the golden bands around her legs and the small crown resting crookedly on her head. But she sounded so sad, and she was just a child like him. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The young dragon jumped, spinning around. Her scales flashed bright yellow with surprise, then settled into orange embarrassment. She stared at Jaiwon with wide eyes that still had tears in them. "You're a human," she said, as if just realizing it. "Yes, my name is Jaiwon. I work here with my father." "You're not supposed to talk to me," she said, but she didn't sound angry, just confused. "I know. I'm sorry. I just heard you crying and wanted to make sure you were all right." The young dragon looked at him for a long moment. Then, to Jaiwon's surprise, she sat down, curling her tail around her feet, like a cat. "I'm Hannah," she said quietly. I'm the Dragon King's youngest daughter. Jaiwin's eyes widened. He should definitely leave now. But something in her expression made him stay. Why were you crying, Princess Hannah? Her scales flickered blue again. My tutor got angry with me. I asked too many questions about humans. She said I shouldn't be interested in lesser species, that it wasn't proper for a dragon princess. A tear rolled down her scaled cheek. But I just wanted to know, is that so wrong? Jaiwin thought about this. My mother used to say that questions are how we learn, that being curious means being alive. Your mother sounds wise. Where is she? She died when I was small, Jaiwin said, but I still remember things she taught me. Oh, Hannah's scales turned dark blue. I'm sorry. Do human children get lonely too, without their mothers? Yes, all the time. They sat together in silence for a moment. Then Hannah asked, Do you really have to go? Jaiwin looked back toward where he'd left his father. He should go, but something in him wanted to stay, wanted to help this lonely dragon princess feel less alone. I have to help my father finish work, he said, but I could come back tomorrow, if you want. Hannah's scales brightened to a soft pink. Really? You would? Sure. Friends help each other feel less lonely. Friends. Hannah tested the word like it was something precious and fragile. Humans and dragons to be friends? I don't see why not. For the first time, Hannah smiled. It was a small smile, but genuine. Tomorrow then, I'll wait here. Jaiwin smiled back and hurried to find his father. High above them, in the throne room that saw everything, Dragon King Taeyong watched this exchange on one of his many viewing screens. He had sensors throughout the palace that showed him anything he wished to see. He had watched his daughter cry alone. He had watched the human boy approach her. Captain Yuna, head of the royal guard, stood nearby. Should I intervene, Your Majesty? The human child approached the princess without permission. Taeyong was quiet for a long time. On the screen, his daughter was wiping away her tears, her scales brightening to happier colors. He hadn't seen her look happy in months. No, he said finally, let them be. Yuna nodded, though she looked uncertain. Later that evening, after all the ambassadors had gone and the throne room was empty, Elder Miho approached the king. He carried with him the crystal of eternal flame, a treasure that had been offered to every dragon king for 5,000 years. It was tradition to offer it, tradition for the king to refuse it. Your Majesty, Miho said, bowing low, once again, the council offers you the crystal of eternal flame. Taeyong looked at the crystal. It was beautiful, priceless, and meaningless, like everything else offered to him. I do not accept, he said, as he always did. Miho bowed and turned to leave, but Taeyong found his eyes drifting to the viewing screen. On it, his daughter slept in her chambers, and tucked carefully beside her pillow was a small piece of polished metal that the human boy had given her. Just a scrap, really, something that had caught the light, in a pretty way. Nothing valuable, but Hannah held it like it was the greatest treasure in the empire. For just a moment, something that might have been longing crossed the ancient dragon's face. Then it was gone, hidden behind 3,000 years of practice. The throne room fell silent. The stars turned in their eternal dance. And somewhere in the palace, a dragon princess dreamed of having a friend, while a human boy wondered if he'd done the right thing. Tomorrow, they would meet again. And slowly, without anyone realizing it yet, something in the empire would begin to change. Jaiwin returned the next day, just as he promised. He found Hannah waiting in the same spot behind the pillar. Her scales brightened a happy yellow when she saw him. You came back, she said, her voice full of relief. I said I would. Jaiwin sat down on the floor, and Hannah settled beside him, careful not to accidentally hit him with her tail. They talked for an hour that day. Hannah asked about Earth, the planet humans came from. Jaiwin told her about oceans and rain, things that didn't exist on most dragon worlds. She listened with wide eyes, fascinated by every detail. We don't have rain in the palace, she said. Everything is controlled. Perfect temperature, perfect air, perfect everything. Doesn't that sound boring? A little, Jaiwin admitted, but also safe. Safe and be lonely, Hannah said quietly. This became their routine. Every day, When Jaiwan finished helping his father with work, he would slip away to meet Hannah. They would talk about everything and nothing. She told him about dragon history and the pressure of being a princess. He told her about his mother's stories and the stars his father showed him on clear nights. Meanwhile, in the throne room, Taeyong watched. He saw every meeting through his palace sensors. Captain Yuna grew more worried each day. "Your Majesty," she said one morning, "the princess is spending too much time with the human child. The other dragons are starting to notice. There is talk." Taeyong said nothing. He simply watched the screen where his daughter laughed at something Jaiwan said. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard her laugh. But the Dragon Council was not as patient as their king. Elder Miho called a meeting, gathering the most important dragons in the empire. "The young princess dishonors herself," said Noble Bora, a dragon whose silver scales marked him as very old and very traditional. "She befriends a servant, a human servant. This cannot continue." "She's just a child," said Nari, Hannah's tutor. "She's curious." "She's a royal child," Bora snapped. "She must learn her place, and humans must learn theirs." The council decided. Hannah would be sent to the military academy on Draken Prime, just like all her older siblings had been. There, she would learn discipline. She would learn to be a proper dragon princess. She would forget about human friends. They brought their decision to Taeyong. Elder Miho presented the case with careful words. "Your Majesty, we believe it is time for Princess Hannah to begin her formal training. The military academy awaits her. It will be good for her development." Taeyong looked at them with his ancient golden eyes. "She is young. Her siblings were the same age when they went," Bora pointed out. "Some were younger." This was true. Taeyang's 12 older children had all left the palace as soon as they could. They governed distant parts of the empire now. They rarely visited. They had learned to be strong, independent, perfect dragons. They had also learned not to need their father. "I will consider your recommendation," Taeyong said finally. The council bowed and left, satisfied. They didn't see the way the king's claws tightened on his throne. That night, Taeyong did something he rarely did. He left his throne room and walked through the palace. Guards jumped to attention as he passed. Servants scattered out of his way. He moved like a shadow through his own home until he reached the observation deck, where humans often gathered during their rest periods. Daehoon was there, looking out at the stars. He turned and saw the Dragon King, and immediately dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty, I—" "Stand," Taeyong said quietly. "I wish to speak with you." Daehoon stood, but kept his eyes lowered respectfully. His heart pounded. Had his son done something wrong? Were they in trouble? "Your son," Taeyong began, and Daehoon's heart sank. "He has befriended my daughter." "I know, Your Majesty. I can make him stop. I will." "No." Taeyong moved to stand beside the window, looking out at the same stars. "Tell me, Daehoon, why does your son choose to spend time with Hannah?" Daehoon was confused by the question. "He says she's lonely. He says she needed a friend. And you allow this, even though it could be dangerous for him?" "Your Majesty, my son has a kind heart, sometimes too kind. But his mother, before she died, she told me to never let the world make him cruel, even if kindness is hard, even if it's risky." Daehoon paused, then added carefully, "He believes your daughter is lonely. He may be wrong. He's only a child. But children sometimes see truths that adults forget to notice." "And what truth is that?" Taeyong asked. Daehoon chose his words carefully. "That a crown is heaviest when worn alone." Taeyong turned to look at the human. Really look at him. Daehoon was old for a human, maybe 50 years. His hair was turning gray. His hands were rough from decades of work. But his eyes were kind and honest. "You speak boldly for a janitor," Taeyong said. "Forgive me, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect. I did not say I minded." Taeyong looked back at the stars. 3,000 years ago, I had a mate. Her name was Myri. We had 2 young children together. Daehoon stayed quiet, sensing this was important. "An enemy came to me offering peace," Taeyong continued, his voice distant with memory. "He brought a gift, a crystal sphere containing a treaty. I accepted it, grateful for the end of war. The sphere contained a virus. It killed my mate and my children within hours. I could do nothing but watch them die. I'm so sorry, Daehoon whispered. Since that day, I have accepted no gifts. I thought this made me strong. I thought it protected me. Taeyang's golden eyes reflected the starlight, but perhaps all it did was ensure I would never be hurt again, because I would never care again. Your Majesty, caring about others is what makes us alive. Without it, we're just going through motions. Taeyong was silent for a long time. Then he asked, Does your son know about the risk of befriending a dragon princess? I've warned him, but he's stubborn, like his mother. Good, Taeyong said, surprising Daehoon. The universe needs more stubborn kindness. The Dragon King turned and walked away, leaving Daehoon standing alone, wondering what had just happened. The next day, the Dragon Council gathered again, expecting Taeyong to approve sending Hannah away. Instead, he surprised him. Hannah will remain at the palace, he announced. But Your Majesty, Bora began. However, Taeyong continued, she will have a formal hatching day celebration, the first I have held for any of my children. The entire empire will attend. It will be a test. A test of what, Your Majesty? Elder Miho asked. We shall see, Taeyong said. The council was confused but satisfied. A formal celebration would remind Hannah of her duties, of her place in dragon society. Surely after being honored before the entire empire, she would forget about her human friend. They didn't understand that Taeyong had other plans. In the maintenance halls below, Jaiwan heard about the celebration. All the human staff were talking about it. There would be dignitaries from 1,000 worlds. Gifts worth more than entire planets. It would be the grandest event the palace had seen in decades. Will Hannah like it? Jaiwan asked his father. Daehoon looked at his son thoughtfully. I don't know. Big celebrations aren't always happy for the person they're celebrating. That night, Jaiwan couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Hannah, about how she would have to stand in front of thousands of important dragons, accepting tributes from strangers who didn't know her at all. She would smile and say the proper words. But would any of it make her happy? He thought about his own birthdays, back when his mother was alive. She never had much money, but she always made him something small with her own hands. A carved toy, a handmade book, things that weren't valuable but meant everything because she made them for him. Suddenly, Jaiwan knew what he had to do. He got out of bed and went to the maintenance workshop. There, in the quiet darkness, he started to work. He gathered scraps of metal from the recycling bins. He found tools small enough for his hands. And slowly, carefully, he began to make something, a gift, for his friend. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to make her smile. It took him 3 nights to finish. When he was done, he held up the small metal dragon, folded from scraps but made with care. It wasn't perfect. The wings were a bit crooked, but it was made with friendship, and that had to count for something. His father found him in the workshop on the 3rd night. Jaiwan, what are you doing? Jaiwan showed him the metal dragon. I made it for Hannah, for her hatching day. Daehoon's face went pale. Son, you can't give a dragon princess a gift made from trash. It's not trash. It's a gift from a friend. Dragons don't understand that. They'll think it's an insult. You could get in serious trouble. Jaiwan looked at the small dragon in his hands. Hannah will understand. I know she will. Daehoon saw the determination in his son's eyes and sighed. He recognized that look. His wife had the same stubborn kindness. Be careful, was all he said. High above, Taeyong watched this conversation on his screens. He saw the small metal dragon in Jaiwan's hands. He saw the boy's determination and the father's worry. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Dragon King felt curious, truly curious. What would happen at the celebration? What would his daughter do? What would this small human child do? He realized he was actually looking forward to finding out, and that feeling, small as it was, felt almost like being alive again. The day of Hannah's hatching day celebration arrived. The imperial palace transformed into something magical. Lights floated in the air like tiny stars. Music played from hidden speakers. Dragons from across the empire filled the grand hall. their scales creating a rainbow of colors. Hannah sat on a smaller throne next to her father. She wore a golden crown that felt too heavy on her head. Her scales kept changing colors nervously, shifting from blue to purple to gray. She tried to keep them steady, but her emotions were too strong. Taeyong sat perfectly still on his larger throne. His golden eyes watched everything, but his face showed nothing. No one could tell what he was thinking. The line of gift-givers stretched all the way across the hall. One by one, they approached with their tributes. A planetary governor brought a chest filled with star gems that glowed like trapped sunlight. A fleet admiral presented advanced weapons technology. A merchant offered rare spices from the edge of known space. Each time, Hannah said the proper words her tutor had taught her. The princess thanks you for your tribute. Her voice sounded small in the huge hall, but she didn't smile. She didn't look excited. She just looked tired. Taeyong noticed. He noticed everything. Finally, Ambassador Sora approached with the human delegation. She bowed deeply before presenting a large data crystal. Princess Hannah, Sora said, humanity offers you the complete archive of Earth's history and culture. Our music, our art, our stories. Everything we were before the dragons saved us. For the first time that day, Hannah's scales brightened to genuine yellow. Really? All of it? Everything? Sora confirmed with a smile. Can you tell me about human music? How does it work? What makes it different from dragon songs? The hall went quiet. Princesses weren't supposed to ask questions during formal ceremonies. They were supposed to accept tributes gracefully and move on. Noble Bora shifted uncomfortably. Elder Miho frowned. This was exactly the kind of behavior they had warned about. But Taeyong raised one claw slightly. Just a small gesture. Everyone in the hall understood. Let her speak. Sora smiled and began explaining about human instruments, about how music could make people feel emotions, about songs that told stories. Hannah listened with complete focus, asking more questions. Her scales glowed brighter and brighter. The dragon nobles looked at each other nervously. This wasn't proper. This wasn't how royal celebrations were supposed to go. Finally, the formal presentations ended. The celebration shifted to a reception where guests could move around freely. Dragons talked in small groups. Servants carried trays of exotic foods. Everything was perfect and proper, and exactly as it should be. That's when Jaiwan appeared. He had been hiding in the shadows, wearing his cleanest work clothes. His father had tried to stop him, but Jaiwan was determined. He clutched the small wrapped package against his chest and walked forward. Every step felt impossible. The dragons around him were so large, so powerful. Many turned to stare at the small human boy walking through their celebration. What was a janitor's son doing here? Captain Yuna saw him immediately. She moved to intercept, her duty clear, remove the intruder. But then she saw where he was going, straight toward Princess Hannah. "Wait," she commanded, stepping in front of him. "You cannot approach the princess uninvited." Hannah heard Yuna's voice. She turned and saw Jaiwan. Her scales flashed bright yellow with happiness. "Wait, he's my friend." The entire hall went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Hannah stood up from her throne and rushed down the steps. Dragons gasped. Princesses didn't rush. They moved with dignity and grace. But Hannah didn't care. She stopped in front of Jaiwan, her scales glowing with joy. "You came. I didn't think you'd be allowed." Jaiwan smiled nervously. "I wanted to give you something. For your hatching day." From his high throne, Taeyong leaned forward, just slightly. But it was the most movement anyone had seen from him all day. "Let the human child speak," he commanded. Captain Yuna stepped back. The crowd parted. Everyone stared as Jaiwan unwrapped his small package. Inside was a metal dragon he had made. It was small enough to fit in his palm. The wings were slightly crooked. The tail was too long. It was made from recycled scraps and held together with maintenance wire. Compared to the treasures piled in the tribute hall, it looked like nothing. Jaiwan held out to Hannah with shaking hands. "Happy hatching day, Hannah. I made it myself. It's not fancy or expensive or anything, but I wanted you to have something that nobody else in the whole empire could give you. Something made just for you. By your friend. The silence in the hall was absolute. Then Noble Bora laughed. It was a cruel sound. This is an insult. A human child gives trash to a dragon princess and calls it a gift. This is exactly why humans must remember their place. Elder Miho nodded. Remove the boy. Punish his father for allowing this disrespect. The crowd began to murmur. Some agreed. Some looked uncertain. But the tide was turning against Jaiwin. Hannah's scales flashed red with anger. Then she did something no one expected. She carefully took the small metal dragon in her claws and held it close to her chest. This is not trash, she said loudly, her voice carrying across the hall. This is the best gift I received today. Everyone stared at her. Hannah looked at the pile of expensive tributes, then at the simple folded metal in her claws. Tears formed in her eyes. All day, strangers gave me expensive things. Things I don't need. Things that don't mean anything. But Jaiwin made this for me with his own hands. He spent time thinking about what would make me happy. He made it because he's my friend, because he cares about me. She held the metal dragon up for everyone to see. This matters. This is real. This is what a gift should be. The hall erupted in noise. Dragons arguing, some calling it scandalous, others looking thoughtful. The celebration descended into chaos. Then Taeyong stood. Everyone froze. The Dragon King never stood during celebrations. He sat on his throne from beginning to end. That was tradition. But now he descended the steps, each footfall echoing like thunder. The crowd parted before him. He walked straight toward Jaiwin, who stood frozen with fear. Taeyong was massive up close. His shadow fell over the small boy like a mountain. His golden eyes looked down at Jaiwin, and for a long moment he said nothing. Jaiwin felt his legs shaking. He wanted to run, but he stood his ground. Did you make this yourself? Taeyong asked. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the hall heard it perfectly. Jaiwin nodded. He tried to speak, but his throat was too dry. He swallowed and tried again. Yes, Your Majesty. Why? Because Hannah is my friend, and friends give each other gifts. Not because they have to, because they want to. Did you expect anything in return? Jaiwin shook his head quickly. No, Your Majesty. I just wanted to make her happy. Taeyong stared at him. Those ancient golden eyes seemed to see right through him, into his heart, reading every thought and feeling. Then Taeyong looked at his daughter. Hannah held the small metal dragon, like it was made of the rarest jewels in the universe. Her scales glowed with colors he hadn't seen in years. Happy colors, grateful colors, loved colors. Something cracked inside Taeyong's chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3,000 years. It hurt. It felt like breaking, but also like healing. He looked back at Jaiwin. Would you make something for me? The hall erupted in gasps and whispers. The Dragon King was asking for a gift? Impossible. Unprecedented. Insane. Jaiwin stared up at him, shocked. You want me to make you something? Yes. It doesn't have to be large or valuable. Just made with the same intention. You made this for my daughter. Taeyong paused, and for the first time in 3,000 years, something that might be a smile touched his face. Make me something because you want to, not because you have to. Surprise me. I have forgotten what it feels like to receive something unexpected. Jaiwin didn't know what to say. He just nodded. Taeyong straightened and turned to face the crowd. The celebration is ended. Everyone leave. I wish to speak with my daughter and her friend. The nobles and ambassadors filed out, confused and whispering. Captain Yuna ushered them away. Elder Miho and Noble Bora left looking furious. Soon, the grand hall was empty except for 3 figures. An ancient dragon king on his throne, a young dragon princess holding a metal dragon made from scraps, and a small human boy who had just changed the empire forever without even knowing it. Taeyong looked at them both. Sit, he said gently. We have much to talk about. Hannah climbed back onto her smaller throne, still holding her gift carefully. Jaiwin sat on the steps, because there was nowhere else for a human boy to sit in a hall made for giants. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Taeyong began to speak not as a king, but as a father, and maybe, just maybe as a friend. The grand hall felt different with just the three of them. Without the crowds and noise, it seemed almost peaceful. Taeyong sat on his throne, looking down at his daughter and the human boy. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Taeyong began to talk. He told them about Myri, his mate, who had died 3,000 years ago. He described her scales, which changed color with the seasons. He talked about his two young children, who had loved to explore and ask endless questions. They were curious about everything, Taeyong said, his voice soft with memory. Just like you, Hannah. Hannah listened with wide eyes. She had heard stories about her father's past, but never like this, never with emotion in his voice, never with sadness and love mixed together. An enemy came offering peace, Taeyong continued. He brought a gift, a crystal sphere containing a treaty. I was so grateful for the end of war that I accepted it without question. He paused, his claws tightening on the armrest of his throne. The sphere contained a virus. By the time I realized it was too late, I watched them die, all three of them, and I could do nothing. Jaiwin felt tears in his eyes. He understood that kind of pain. He had lost his mother too. That's why you never accept gifts, Jaiwin said quietly. You're afraid. The Dragon King looked at him sharply. No one ever called him afraid. Kings weren't supposed to be afraid of anything. But then Taeyang's expression softened. Yes, I was afraid. If I never accepted anything, if I never let anyone close, then I could never be hurt like that again. Hannah's scales shifted to deep blue. But, Father, you pushed everyone away. My brothers and sisters all left because they thought you didn't love them. They thought you didn't care. I know, Taeyong said, and for the first time there was pain in his voice. I thought I was protecting myself, protecting all of you, but I was wrong. Being alone hurts too, just differently. Jaiwin thought about his own life after his mother died, how he had been scared to care about anyone for a long time, how his father had been patient with him, waiting until he was ready to open his heart again. My mother died when I was little, Jaiwin said. For a long time, I didn't want anything from anyone. Everything reminded me of her and made me sad. But then I realized something. If I never let anyone matter to me, then she died for nothing. The love doesn't disappear just because someone is gone. It stays inside you, and you can give it to other people. Taeyong stared at the small human boy. This child, whose entire species he had saved almost as an afterthought, was teaching him something he had forgotten over 3,000 years. I made that gift for Hannah because caring about her helps me remember that loving people is good. Jaiwin continued, even when it's scary, even when you might lose them someday. The caring is what makes us alive. A single tear rolled down Taeyang's scale face. It was the first tear he had cried in 3,000 years that wasn't from grief. This was something else. Recognition. Hope. The painful beginning of healing. Thank you, Taeyong said to Jaiwin, for reminding me of something I had forgotten. Hannah climbed down from her throne and walked to her father. She was still small enough to fit under his wing. Taeyong wrapped his wing around her, holding her close like he hadn't done since she was newly hatched. I'm sorry I made you feel unloved, he whispered to her. I understand now, Hannah said, pressing against his side. You were hurting. But Father, I'm here. I'm alive, and I want to know you. They sat like that for a while. Jaiwin watched, feeling like maybe he should leave, but Taeyong gestured for him to stay. You said you would make something for me. Taeyong said, take your time. Make it mean something. I can wait. Jaiwin nodded. I will. I promise. But while this healing moment happened in the Grand Hall, anger was building elsewhere in the palace. Elder Miho and Noble Bora met in secret with other traditional dragons. They could not allow this to continue. The king has been compromised, Bora hissed. A human child has manipulated him somehow. Don't be ridiculous, said Nari, who had been invited to the meeting. The king simply remembered how to feel. That's not manipulation. It's weakness, Miho insisted. The Dragon King must be above such things. The entire empire depends on his strength. Maybe the empire needs less strength and more heart, Nari suggested. The other dragons stared at her like she was insane, but she continued anyway. I've watched Princess Hannah with her human friend. She's happier than I've ever seen her. She asks better questions. She thinks more deeply. Maybe this friendship is exactly what she needs. Friendship with a human? Bora spat the words like they tasted bad. It's unnatural. Dragons don't befriend servants. Why not? Nari challenged. Who made that rule? And why must we follow it? But she was outnumbered. The traditional dragons had made their decision. They couldn't move against the king directly, but they could remove the problem. If the human boy disappeared, everything would return to normal. They began to make plans. Captain Yuna heard whispers of conspiracy. She had served Taeyong for 800 years. She knew when something was wrong. She went to the king immediately. Your Majesty, there are those in the court who plan to harm the human child. Taeyang's eyes flashed with anger. Old anger. Dangerous anger. Who? I don't have proof yet, but I will find them. Do so. And Yuna? Increase security around Jaiwin and his father. If anyone touches them, they answer to me. Meanwhile, Jaiwin struggled with what to make for the Dragon King. He sat in the maintenance workshop for 3 nights, trying different ideas. Nothing felt right. What do you give someone who has everything? Someone who has lived for thousands of years? Someone who has refused the treasures of entire civilizations? Daehoon found him on the 3rd night, surrounded by failed attempts. Bent metal, broken wire, crumpled designs. I don't know what to make, Jaiwin admitted. Nothing seems good enough. Daehoon sat down beside his son. Do you remember what your mother used to say about gifts? Jaiwin thought back. She said the best gifts aren't things. They're pieces of yourself you choose to share. Exactly. So what piece of yourself can you share with the Dragon King? Jaiwin thought about Taeyang's story, about losing everyone he loved, about 3,000 years of holding all that pain inside with no way to let it out. Then Jaiwin understood. He spent the next 2 days gathering materials. Not metal this time. Paper, wire, binding thread. He worked carefully, measuring and cutting and assembling. When he was finished, he had made a journal, simple, handmade, bound with recycled wire. Inside were blank pages waiting to be filled. Daehoon looked at it and smiled. Your mother would be proud. Do you think he'll understand? Jaiwin asked. I think he's the only one who will. On the 6th day after the celebration, Jaiwin requested an audience with the Dragon King. To everyone's surprise, Taeyong granted it immediately. The entire court gathered to witness this unprecedented event. Jaiwin walked into the throne room, carrying his simple gift. He wasn't scared this time. He had learned that Taeyong, beneath all his power and age, was just someone who was hurting and trying to heal. Your Majesty, Jaiwin said, bowing, I made something for you. He held out the journal, compared to the treasures in the palace. It looked like nothing, just paper and wire, simple and plain. Taeyong descended from his throne and took the journal carefully in his claws. He opened it and saw the blank pages. What is this? He asked, but his voice wasn't angry, just curious. My mother told me that grief lives in our hearts, but memories live on paper, Jaiwin explained. You've kept everything locked inside for 3,000 years. All the pain, all the memories of the people you loved. Maybe it would hurt less if you wrote it down. Not for anyone else. Just for you. So the memories have somewhere to go besides just your heart. Taeyong stared at the blank pages. His claws trembled slightly. 3,000 years of memories. 3,000 years of pain he had never shared with anyone. The throne room was absolutely silent. Every dragon watched their king, wondering what he would do. Taeyong closed the journal carefully. Then he looked at Jaiwin, and there were tears streaming down his face. I accept this gift, he said, his voice thick with emotion, not as a king receiving tribute from a subject, but as a person receiving kindness from a friend. He held the journal against his chest. Thank you, Jaiwin, for seeing what I needed when I couldn't see it myself. The court erupted in whispers. The Dragon King had accepted a gift, actually accepted it, after 3,000 years. Elder Miho stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. Your Majesty, this is... Enough, Taeyong said quietly, but his voice carried absolute authority. I know what some of you think, that I've grown weak. that I've been manipulated. You're wrong. For 3,000 years, I was dead inside. I ruled perfectly because I felt nothing. But this child, this human boy, reminded me what it means to be alive. He looked around the throne room, meeting the eyes of every dragon there. Any who question my decision question their king. Choose your next words very carefully. No one spoke. The power in Taiyang's voice was absolute. He was still the Dragon King, still the ruler of the empire. But now he was something else too. He was someone who could feel again, someone who could care again, someone who could accept gifts from friends. And that somehow made him stronger than he had ever been before. The days following Taiyang's acceptance of the journal were strange and tense. Word spread through the empire faster than light itself. The Dragon King had accepted a gift, not from royalty, not from a powerful nation, from a human child, a janitor's son. On 1,000 worlds, beings whispered about what this meant. Some saw it as a sign of weakness. Others saw it as something new, something hopeful. In the palace, the traditional dragons grew more desperate. Elder Miho called secret meetings in the dark hours when most of the palace slept. Noble Bor recruited others who believed the old ways must be preserved. "We cannot touch the king directly," Miho said to the gathered conspirators. "But we can remove the source of this madness. Without the human boy, everything returns to normal." They made plans, quiet plans, careful plans. An accident could be arranged. No one would question the death of one human child among billions. But they had forgotten about Captain Yuna. She had served Taeyong for 800 years. She knew every corner of the palace. She heard every whisper. And she was loyal not just to the throne, but to the dragon who sat upon it. When she discovered the full extent of conspiracy, she went directly to Taeyong. "Your Majesty, I have proof. Elder Miho and Noble Bora plan to harm the human child tonight. They have recruited guards who will make it look like an accident during the maintenance shift." Taiyang's eyes blazed with cold fire. "How many are involved?" 12, including Miho and Bora. "Arrest them all. Now!" Yuna hesitated. "Your Majesty, these are high-ranking nobles. The council will protest. There will be political consequences." "I don't care. They threatened someone under my protection. They threatened my friend's son. Arrest them." Within the hour, Yuna's loyal guards had captured all 12 conspirators. They were brought before Taeyong in chains, something that hadn't happened to nobles in 1,000 years. Miho stood proud despite the chains. "You make a mistake, Your Majesty. We acted to preserve the Empire's dignity." "You acted out of fear," Taeyong said coldly. "Fear of change. Fear of anything different from what you know." "We acted to preserve tradition," Bor insisted. "The natural order. Dragons do not befriend humans. Kings do not accept gifts from servants. These are the rules that have kept the Empire strong." "No," Taeyong said, standing from his throne. "These are the rules that made the Empire rigid, brittle, unable to grow." He walked down the steps until he stood before them. "I could execute you. By law. You've earned death for plotting against those under royal protection." The conspirators paled. Even Miho looked afraid now. "But I won't," Taeyong continued, "because a wise human child reminded me that holding on to pain, even justified pain, only creates more emptiness. Instead, you will serve. For the next 100 years, you will work among the humans you despise. You will learn what this boy already knows. That worth isn't measured by species or status, but by the courage to care about others." The sentence was worse than death for the proud dragons. To work as servants? Among humans? The humiliation would be unbearable. But Taiyang's word was final. The conspirators were taken away. News of the Dragon King's justice spread through the palace. The message was clear. Anyone who threatened Jaiwan or his father would face the king's wrath. But the story also carried another message. One of mercy. One of second chances. The Empire had never seen anything like it. That night, in his private chambers, Taeyong opened a journal Jaiwan had made. He picked up a writing stylus, his large claws awkward with the small tool. For a long time, he just stared at the blank page. Then he began to write. He wrote about Myri, about how her scales shimmered in the starlight, about the sound of her laugh, about the way she could always make him smile, even after the hardest days of war. He wrote about his children, their names, their personalities, the games they loved to play. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Memories he had locked away for 3,000 years poured onto the pages. Happy memories, sad memories, moments he had forgotten, and moments he could never forget. He wrote until his claws ached. When he finally stopped, hours later, he realized his face was wet with tears. But this time, they didn't feel like grief alone. They felt like release. For the first time in 3,000 years, Taeyong smiled. Really smiled. It felt strange on his face, like his expression had forgotten how. But it felt good too. Meanwhile, Jaiwan and Hannah continued their friendship openly now. They explored the palace together, talking about everything and nothing. Other young dragons saw them and grew curious. If a princess could be friends with a human, maybe they could too. Slowly, cautiously, young dragons began approaching human children. It was awkward at first. The species had different customs, different ways of thinking, but they found common ground. In games, in stories, in the simple joy of having someone to talk to. The rigid hierarchy of the empire began to soften, just a little, just in small ways. But change had to start somewhere. Months passed. Jaiwan grew taller. Hannah's scales matured to a more stable color, a beautiful purple blue that reflected her calm happiness. The palace felt different, lighter somehow. Taeyang's journal grew thick with writing. He shared portions of it with Hannah, helping her understand their family's history. He read sections to his council, helping them understand why he was changing things. The words on those pages began to reshape how dragons thought about emotion and strength. 1 year after Jaiwan's first gift, Taeyong summoned the boy to the throne room. Jaiwan arrived nervous, wondering if he'd done something wrong. Instead, Taeyong held out a small box. "I made something for you." Jaiwan opened the box carefully. Inside was a dragon figure, identical in size and shape to the one he had made for Hannah. But this one was crafted from starlight metal, a material so rare it was worth more than planets. The craftsmanship was perfect, every scale detailed, every wing balanced. "I've been practicing," Taeyong admitted. "I wanted to give you something made with the same care you showed me." "Thank you, Jaiwan, for reminding a king how to be a person." Jaiwan held the metal dragon carefully. It was the most valuable thing he'd ever touched. But what made it precious wasn't the material. It was knowing the Dragon King had made it himself, with his own claws, for a friend. "Thank you, your majesty," Jaiwan whispered. "Just Taeyong," the dragon said. "When we're alone, just call me Taeyong." The changes continued to spread through the empire. Humans were promoted to positions of real authority based on their abilities, not their species. Other races found their voices heard more often in council meetings. Young dragons learned that asking questions wasn't weakness, but strength. The transformation was slow. There was resistance, but the ripples kept spreading outward, changing everything they touched. 2 years after the celebration, Taeyong made an announcement that shocked everyone. He was creating a new position in the empire, ambassador of interconnection. The role would work to build bridges between species, to foster understanding and cooperation. He gave the position to Hannah. She accepted with scales shimmering gold with pride. Her first act was to create an exchange program, allowing young beings from different species to learn together, to work together, to become friends. The program started small, just a few dozen participants. But it grew quickly. Within 5 years, thousands of young beings across the empire were part of it. One evening, under the artificial stars of the Imperial Garden, Taeyong sat with Hannah and Jaiwan. The boy had grown into a young man now, 17 years old and training to be a diplomat. Hannah had grown too, her scales magnificent and her confidence strong. They talked about simple things, about the stars, about a new sector Hannah would visit, about Jaiwan's upcoming assignment to a distant world. "Father," Hannah asked, "do you regret all those years you refused gifts?" Taeyong thought about this carefully. "I regret the pain that made me build those walls, but I can't regret the journey that brought me here. Sometimes we must be broken before we can be whole in a new way." Jaiwin looked at the ancient dragon. What was the real gift, Taeyong? The journal or the friendship? Taeyong smiled, an expression that had become common on his face. Neither. The gift was remembering that I could still feel. The journal was just a key that unlocked it. And the friendship? He looked at both of them with warmth in his ancient eyes. That is what grew in the space that opened when the ice around my heart finally melted. He paused, then added quietly, "You gave me back my life, Jaiwin. Both of you did. Not just existence, but actual life. For that, I will be forever grateful." Years later, historians would point to this as a turning point of the Draconis' empire. The day the Dragon King accepted a gift from a janitor's son. The day an entire civilization remembered that power without compassion is just tyranny wearing a crown. But in that moment, sitting under the stars, it was just three friends enjoying a quiet evening together. A dragon king who had learned to feel again, a dragon princess who had found her purpose, and a human boy who had shown them both that the smallest gestures could change everything. Sometimes the most important changes begin with simple acts of kindness, a gift freely given, a gift freely accepted, and the courage to care about others, even when it's scary, even when it's difficult. That courage, more than any army or technology or ancient power, was what truly made the empire strong. Because strength without heart is just stone. But strength with love, that can move entire worlds. And it all started with a small metal dragon, folded from scraps and offered with friendship,